Welcome to Money 911, the podcast where we dive into the realms of health, wealth, and peace of mind. I'm your host, Kris Miller, and today we have the privilege of speaking with Gregg Braden, a New York Times bestselling author known for his groundbreaking works such as The Divine Matrix and The God Code. His latest book, Pure Human, The Hidden Truth of Our Divinity, Power, and Destiny, is a profound journey in self-discovery that challenges our conventional thinking about our origins, limits, and extraordinary potential that lies within us. In Pure Human, Gregg Braden presents a compelling and sometimes uncomfortable truth. We are at a critical juncture where our choices could irreversibly change the course of human history. With the integration of synthetic bodies, artificial intelligence, and computer chips, we face the possibility of losing the very qualities that make us human. Qualities like emotion, empathy, intimacy, and forgiveness. Today, we will explore these themes and more. So let's dive in and see what insights Gregg has to share. All right, we are here together. Gregg Braden, it's just such a pleasure and honor. We have beautiful conversations, and I'm so happy that you've joined us today.
Well, Kris, it's been a while since we had our last conversation. I'm coming to you today from our studio, our festive studio, just outside of Santa Fe, New Mexico. It's the pretty close to the end of the year, 2024.
Right.
And I want to just thank you for the opportunity to be with your community once again, my family, and your community that you've created. As always, this is an unscripted conversation. We have no idea where it's going to go because I am going to follow your lead. That's what I'm going to do.
All right. Well, and I kind of been following your lead, and I've been following and listening to you, and what you're talking about in your new book, Pure Human, is the way you articulate what I'm instinctively feeling is so appropriate. And my family here, my audience, everybody loves you. And I've been asking them, what do you want to ask them, and different questions. But today I wanted to really, because it's more than a book, it's really a call to action. And it really causes us to reflect deeply on what's going on. So, your chapter headings are really easy to just go into a flow here, but I really like the way that you've laid this out, and I got a galley copy, and I didn't did a quick perusal of it, and I just wanted to get right into it. But this is serious. Fits our show, Money 911, because I talk about health, wealth, and peace of mind. And you lead right into like, we are the prize, right? The battle for, who we are. It's the war between good and evil that, in a simple way that I say it, is happening, right?
Yeah. Well, that's you've just encapsulated the book. Well, first, I want our viewers to know that you are such a powerful woman. You have wrangled a physical copy of the book that I have not even seen yet. It's called a galley proof that goes out to media and interviewers. For some reason, I guess I'm not on the mailing list.
Yeah.
Of course, I wrote the book, and I know what it says, but I haven't seen one of those. So thank you for even going through the book and looking at it. So let me just begin at the top. This book, Kris, is I did something a little different with this book than I would typically do. I took 7 months off, with just a couple of exceptions where I had to be on a live stage. I took 7 months off to write this book. Typically, I write the books on airplanes, in airports, in hotels, traveling somewhere.
Right.
And I wanted to say in this book precisely what was in my heart. And this is every book I've written, I've done that. And every book I've written, I've always pulled back a little bit to conform with our guidelines, publishing guidelines, publishers' requests, things like that. I didn't do that with this book. because I feel that I had to say something that is so relevant to our world and our lives today. I didn't want to write just a book that's cool to read and then you walk away and you've got a world out there you don't know what to do with. I wanted to accurately reflect a context. So the title of the book is Pure Human. The subtitle is The Hidden Truth of Our Divinity, Power, and Destiny. It actually, Kris, the book has two parallel themes. One theme that you will see throughout the book is that there's a concerted effort, ongoing, not in the future, it's happening right now, to replace our humanness, our very biology with technology, to replace our biology with AI, artificial intelligence. That's all over the news now, with chemicals in the blood, RFID chips under the skin, nanosensors in the body. And this is a trend that is gaining momentum toward an end point. That end point, for a number of reasons, is the year 2030. 2030 has been earmarked by, well, it's been identified through ancient civilizations and ancient cycles of time, cosmological cycles, and things like that. But what makes it more relevant, it has been earmarked by forces, by individuals, by corporations and organizations such as the World Economic Forum and the United Nations, to be the date when they hope to accomplish a level of social engineering to remake not just the world around us, but for the first time to remake the world within us. The only way to accomplish the goals that are proposed. And I know some of our viewers are very familiar with this. They know more than I do. And some may have never heard this. The terms that are being tossed around in mainstream are things like the Great Reset. That is, they would like to have accomplished by the year 2030. The fourth industrial revolution is another term that's being used to indicate that the digitization of the planet and all life and all resources on the planet, they hope to have accomplished by the year 2030 for purposes of centralization, power, authoritarianism, and control. And I identify that. I don't want to dwell on it, but that you have to look at the context. This is the big context. People say to me all the time, Kris, isn't it interesting that so many big things are happening in the world all at the same time, spontaneously, they just happen to be occurring now. Isn't that interesting? Yeah. And if you believe that the events of the world, the big things that are impacting our lives, if you believe those things are happening spontaneously, it can be very frightening, very disconcerting. Whether you're talking about wars popping up, in Eastern Europe and the Middle East, you're talking about the buckling and the collapse of financial systems, economic systems. You're talking about rampant disease and new diseases we've never seen, social change, political change, climate change, refugee change. I mean, all of these things are happening. They're related. and they're related because of this 2030 end date. What you're seeing are nations, governments, organizations, corporations, people in positions of power. They're all jockeying to be in the best possible place when this end date, this expiration date of these systems occurs. And I'm not saying it's like January 1st of 2030, but they have identified 2030 as the goal and the end date. When they want to see the world and our bodies change to accommodate their vision of the Great Reset or the fourth industrial revolution, or whatever it is that we want to call it. So the book identifies this and identifies the context, not in a way that makes anyone wrong. My goal was not to call out anyone for being wrong. I do identify the UN and the World Economic Forum, who now have a formal agreement signed in the year 2019 through the UN SDG 2030 program to implement the World Economic Forum vision through the UN protocols. And that's concerning because we have legal and contractual agreements as the United States and Western nations to follow the UN lead on these programs. And so now what used to be the ideas of a handful of people, that meet once a year in Davos, Switzerland, which they have every right to do, and that's cool. It doesn't bother anybody. Now they have the teeth to implement these ideas through the United Nations that we are legally beholden to in some respects, not 100%, but in some respects. So I'm identifying that in the book. But the flip side is that the new science, the new discoveries, Kris, are telling us that we are absolutely not what we've been told. We're so much more than we've been led to believe. And the science is showing us that the human body, our biology, in many cases meets and even exceeds the capabilities of the very technology that we're being asked to put into our bodies. We are the technology. And it's a very, very different way of thinking. And I'll just encapsulate it briefly, and then I'll stop and we can go wherever we want to go. When I was a kid back in 1950s, 1960s, and even today in the schools, young people are taught about biology as being like sticky, wet, gooey, mushy stuff, inside the body, and frail, fragile, flawed, and prone to errors is the way that biologists often look at the human body, that we are prone to failure modes that they call disease, for example. And that's one way of looking at the body. About 5 years ago, something shifted in the scientific community, and they began to look at the body not from a biological perspective, but from the perspective of IT, information technology. Now, I just want to say this is a very, very different way of thinking of the human body. What they're doing is looking at the cells and the DNA and the cell membranes and the neurons and the systems. They're looking at it from the perspective of information processing and information storage. And what they're finding is that we are a highly advanced, technologically sophisticated form of technology. It's called soft technology. So it's not the primitive, hard technology of a silicon chip or a physical wire or a microprocessor. I mean, they're fast, efficient, but they're primitive compared to what we are, because we are more than that. We're neurons, cell membranes, DNA. And what they're finding is not being published in the biology books where people would expect to see it. It's being published in these obscure, technological journals like IEEE, or there's a Journal of Advanced Computing. And I know all of our viewers have a beautiful copy of the Journal of Advanced Computing on their bedstand for light bedtime reading, just like I do. but it's in the Journal of Advanced Computing where they literally, and these are peer-reviewed papers, they're literally saying that human DNA functions as a fractal antenna within the cells of the body. Now, what's that mean? Well, we all know that an antenna picks up signals, is tuned to pick up certain signals. A fractal antenna means that we're picking up many signals across a broad spectrum of information simultaneously, all at the same time, and triaging and processing that information. It's a very different way of thinking. The same thing with neurons. They're saying that neurons are antenna as well. The same thing with the cell membranes and the receptors that cover the cell membranes. They're antenna, they're receptors, they're processing information. So now that the scientific community is at least open to looking at this, what they're finding is that they are striving to reproduce in the laboratory what we are capable of naturally through our biology. All right. So I'm identifying that in the book. The effort to replace our natural biology is an effort to deny access to the power of what it means to be human, so that the agendas and the goals can be accomplished with less pushback. When we embrace the truth of who we are and what our true capacities are, we can talk about this as much as you want.
Yes.
When we embrace those things, we are less fearful of change in the world. And without that fear, we are less vulnerable and less susceptible to those ideas and those agendas that are not good for us to begin with. So I can see why these are not just random processes. I can see why, if the goal was to drive a population of a nation or a planet to a way of thinking and living within even a longer period of time, one of the things that would support that goal is to keep that population from the deep truth of their power. And this is nothing new. It's been going on for a long time. What is new is that the technology now has evolved to do this in ways that we've never seen on Earth. And I'm aware that it's happening, Kris, and I'm still in awe of how attractive the marketing makes it look for people to give their humanness away to the technology. And our young people are very vulnerable to this right now. Very sexy marketing on coming across Instagram, YouTube, Facebook, things like that. So I just said a lot of words in answer to the introduction. I'm going to stop there and ask if it makes sense. And then where would you like to go with that?
I've created the Safe Money Blueprint. This is the same strategy that thousands of my clients have used to feel secure about their financial future. And you can get it free at healthymoneyhappylife.com/blueprint. Well, it totally makes sense, and it articulates the ancient message that's inside it, coded in our DNA. And then when we're born into this darkness, we really aren't taught how to activate our own connection with the spirit so that we can heal ourselves and heal others and change the world. It's been blocked, and you say it's so attractive. The way you articulate real simply, just seeing what's happening with the youth, that they will never be able to think the way that we were brought up in the same era. The way that we even consciously think about things is being removed. I mean, I can just go to AI and look something up. I don't even need to use my brain anymore. And it's all subtly changing to this transhuman, and it's a race. I know God wins in the end, but in the meantime, people are making choices. And unfortunately, the thing that gets me, Greg, is that they're going to use the help for the healing of, maybe you put it in your brain and then you can walk again and talk again. And so that's kind of sexy to attract people into it. So it is a race. It's a race between human and divine, wouldn't you say?
It is. And I want to be clear. I know some of your viewers are familiar with me. Some may have never seen me before. I'm a scientist. I'm not anti-tech at all. I'm a degreed earth scientist, a geologist, a geophysicist with a background, very strong background, life sciences, math, physics, computer science, linguistics, and archaeology. And I say that because it's that multidisciplinary background that gives me the ability to stay current with these new discoveries. And one of the things I've found, Kris, technology is never right, wrong, good, or bad. It's the thinking that underlies why it was developed and how it's going to be implemented. I'll just give you a couple of quick examples. I mean, everybody typically talks about, we split the atom, it could have been used for good, and we made weapons out of it, made bombs. But more relevant to what we're talking about, in 2023, just last year, the FDA here in the United States approved the use of computer chips in the brain. So this is Elon Musk created a company called Neuralink. It's the first chip in the brain that communicates with the computer without the need to touch a keyboard or with any cables or external devices. So you think, and I'll just share just briefly how this works a little to insert this. There's when we talk about something in the brain, there's a space between the bottom of the skull and the top of the brain. So the brain doesn't usually bump right up against the bone. And it's in that space is where this chip is placed. There's a hole about the size of a nickel that bone is removed from the skull. The chip is put in there. And from that chip, there are, and computer programmers recognize this number, 1024. These are the way 32-bit machines work. There's 1,024 microfilaments, tiny probes that go from that chip down into the neocortex of the brain, and they're picking up the information coming across those synapses. And they're picking it up, they deliver it to the chip processes it, and then transmits it through some, like it's akin to a Bluetooth technology, so it's wireless to the computer, and then the computer is set up to receive that information. Well, that could be a really beautiful technology. So, for example, a young man or woman gives their lives to defending this country. They are on a battlefield in Afghanistan or Iraq or Syria or wherever it is these days,
right?
Ukraine. And they come home and they've lost arms or legs, maybe multiple arms and multiple legs. Now we have the technology to create the prosthetics to replace those arms and legs, and with the computer chip in the brain to operate by thinking just the way we would in normal life. I'd like to pick up this cup of tea, and the prosthetics will do it. And now with that chip, they can hold their babies in their arms, and they can brush their own hair, brush their own teeth, feed their own faces. And I cannot think of a more beautiful gift to give to a human that has given so much to the nation that they love, any nation. So that is one application.
Right.
There's another application where the proposals are all newborns by the year 2030 will be implanted with chips in their brain to give them what is believed to be the competitive edge, so they can be the best version of themselves and they can compete in the world. That is taking the same technology, not on a case by case as needed basis. That is taking the technology in mass. I'm pushing back on that for a number of reasons. And I'm just going to share briefly one of the reasons. I have young people come to my programs all the time, and they say, Mr. Braden, and I say, please call me Gregg. And so they say, Gregg, what's the problem with having the technology in our bodies? Because no one's ever told them how precious and about the sanctity of their own humanness, number one. And number two, they have been taught that our bodies are flawed by their very existence, and that we are a weak, vulnerable, and flawed form of life, and that we need something outside of us to be at our best. We need this technology. Well, I'm just going to share a couple of examples here. When I was a kid, now I guess you said we're close to the same age. So when you were a kid, we were taught that when we come into the world, we have a finite number of brain cells, X number of brain cells, and you never get any more. And so that was used as leverage. When we went to college, they said, don't drink another beer, because every beer you drink is going to destroy more brain cells, and you've only got so many to start with, right?
Right.
Well, now we know that's not true. What we know in recent years, very well documented in peer-reviewed journals, is there's a part of the brain, it's the hippocampus, that continues to produce brain cells up until the last breath that we take in this life. And there's a catch. Unless those brain cells, unless the newly emerging brain cells are engaged in a meaningful way within about a week, within about 7 days, they will atrophy and they will die. And the reason is because of the way human biology works. We are an on-demand biological system. There is an adage in biology called use it or lose it. We've all have heard that before. If the body feels that those new cells are not needed, then they will atrophy and die. And this is true not just for the brain cells, it's true for everything in the body. When we replace our immune response, for example, with an artificial immune response. It may be effective for a targeted contagion in a moment in time, but what is the price that we pay for that? The price is the body says, body's intelligence, you don't need me to do all the things that I used to do. And now all of a sudden, the immune system, it's looking for one contagion at the exclusion of all the other ones that we see every day that are typically no problem. They become a problem because we've lost our ability to recognize and defend the body against those contagions. The same thing is true with conception and reproduction and memory and cognition. So when we start replacing parts, functions of the brain with computer chips, there's a part of the brain that says, well, maybe you don't need me anymore. And you can apply that, throughout the body in one generation. Next generation, through epigenetics, we pass these epigenetic factors on to the next generation. And pretty soon the body says, oh, we used to do those things, but we now don't do those because something else does those functions for us. A chip or a wire or a sensor or a chemical does those for us. So it becomes a vestige of our past. This is how you lose a species. It's exactly how you lose a species. The title of the book, Pure Human, one of the reasons that I chose that title. First of all, I'm going to acknowledge what we're talking about isn't necessarily common in everyday circles. I mean, if you follow it, if you follow the science, if you read the articles, this is nothing new. But some of the best minds of our time are telling us, Kris, that unless we change our thinking and the trajectory of technology, that thinking, where it's leading us, is very probably we are the last generation of what are called pure humans that the earth will know. And if there are no humans anywhere else, then we're the last generation that the universe will ever know. And this is one of the things that surprises people. They say, well, we could just try it. And if these things don't work, we'll just go back to what we used to do. What they don't understand, the way the human body works is that when something new is introduced into the body, we morph and adapt to conform to whatever it is that's new, meaning that we are no longer what we were before those changes were introduced. So when we introduce technology into our bodies and our bodies morph and adapt to embrace that technology, we're no longer what we were before. There's nothing to go back to. You can't go back because the body doesn't function the same way any longer. So it's not like a little dial, where you can just dial and say, let's try this. It doesn't work. Oh, let's dial it back. You can't necessarily do it that way. And you said the word first. I didn't say it yet. You introduced the word transhuman. There is an entire movement that has always been around since the late 1800s, early 1900s. Originally, it was called eugenics, and that term became very unpopular. It has now resurfaced with a different name. It is the idea that there are features of the human that need to be eliminated or weeded out of the gene pool, certain characteristics, certain kinds of IQ, athletic ability, and before technology, it was done through selective breeding and sterilization and forced sterilization. Legal forced sterilization in the United States was legal up until, I think, the mid-1950s.
That's right.
And now we no longer use that term. The term is transhuman. Trans simply means beyond. So I was talking about this in a program recently, and the transgender movement is so much in our mindset. People say, well, is this having to do with transgender? Transgender simply means beyond gender, beyond the polarities of the gender. Transhuman means beyond the biology of the human, and not necessarily related, but it's that idea. So the transhuman movement that has always existed is gaining tremendous momentum as well as the ability to implement legally through policies and laws some of the ideas that we're talking about. And it's done so cleverly, Kris, that often we may not even know what it is that we're agreeing to, may not even know what it is that's happening, because the narrative is selected, and they make it look really, really enticing. And as we barrel down these next 5 years, barrel down the path toward that 2030 end date, the way the deception will occur is that we'll be enticed by saying our lives will be safer, will be more secure, life will be easier and more efficient. All we have to do is give away our humanness in exchange for the safety and the efficiency. They're not saying that. All we have to do is say yes. And I mean, this is already happening in some parts of the world. Interestingly, Northern Europe, Sweden is one of the countries that is leading the way in this thinking, but they don't position it the way that we are right now. I've seen television ads, and this is the way we're going to see it in the US, where there's a man walking down the street, sky is blue, birds are singing, beautiful music. He doesn't carry a briefcase, doesn't have a wallet, doesn't have any car keys, and he says, I've never been freer in my life. What he believes is giving him his freedom is he has 15 RFID chips implanted into his body. So one of those chips, he goes to work, and one of those chips opens the secure door. And he goes to the market, and one of those chips, he in his wrist, he runs it over the scanner, and it's linked to his bank account, and he paid his bills. And another one, you go to the ATM. Another one starts the car. And this is his idea of freedom. To be part of that system, those chips are all tied in to a grid, a matrix of information, massive databases that are run by artificial intelligence. And the UN proposals and the WEF proposals are to implement that on a global scale, where every resource is digitized, every life. Now, not every form of life. I mean, every element. All the giraffes in Africa will have a digital ID. All the fish in the oceans, we can digitize every fish. Every tree has a digital ID. Every human has a digital ID. And through that, our consumption habits are part of that database. What we eat, how frequently we eat, where we travel, what it is, what kind of activities that we engage in. But it goes even beyond that, because now, and this is all peer-reviewed science, the biometrics that are possible from these chips, they record not only the heart rate and the pulse and blood sugar levels, which can be good. This is one of those places it can be good for some people if you need to monitor that. But the chips can also record emotional responses to whatever it is that's happening in the world. So let's just say, hypothetically, we are, as a society, asked or even mandated to accept something into our bodies that we don't want. On the outside, we can say yes, nod our head and agree, but the biometrics, the emotional biometrics, are showing the database that we're not on board, that we might be a problem. And law enforcement is concerned about this. I mean, we got science fiction movies that talk about predictive crime and predictive, I'm just trying to think of, there was a movie called Gattaca, Gattaca, that came out. Ethan Hawke, Uma Thurman, they were people that had a very special genetic sequence, were the focus. Minority Report, that's the one I'm thinking of, that where these kinds of biometrics and DNA were used to anticipate crime before it happened. Well, the problem with all of this is that none of the AI, none of the databases, none of the chips can compensate for human consciousness or what is called human agency. And what that means is we may have all the biomarkers. Maybe our parents were criminals. Maybe our brother, our sister's a criminal. And maybe we're predisposed to a criminal activity. But that doesn't mean we're going to commit the crime. It means that we may be wired, but we have consciousness. Maybe we have chosen to become a better person, to heal the hurt that led to the crime in the past. And that's human agency. And none of this can account for that. None of the AI, none of the algorithms can account for that. And I talk about this in the book. They've used AI to try to predict crimes in a couple, and actually arrests, false arrests have occurred in a couple of different cities. Chicago was one of the cases where a man was sitting in his living room with his family watching TV. The cops come to the door and they arrest him in front of his young daughter. So he's handcuffed, arrested, handcuffed by the authorities, which is traumatizing for a child that believes that they're safe in their home. And his daughter now is in therapy because of this. He and his wife had to take their daughter to therapy, but he was incarcerated for a brief period of time because fortunately they found the mistake. But what happened was they used facial recognition software and artificial intelligence on a security camera in a store where watches had been stolen. And for whatever reason, his biometrics were close enough that the artificial intelligence pegged him as the thief when he was not. And of course, they sorted it out. I think he said he was incarcerated for like 30 hours or something like that, and they sorted it out. But that's not a one-off. This has happened in other cases in other countries. There's another case history in London that I talk about. And these are just examples. The technology is awesome technology. It's the thinking underlying it that goes against the very nature of human sovereignty, of human freedom. And now I'm going to use a word that we haven't used yet, and then we'll define it. The word is human divinity. It flies in the face of human divinity. What is divinity? The contemporary definition, a lot of people try to link it to religion because of schools of divinity and things like that make those connections. But the definition of divinity surprises a lot of people. It simply says our ability to transcend perceived limitations. So transcend, to become more than. Perceived means they may not even be real. They are limitations from our family, our upbringing, our culture, our society, our friends, our community, obsolete science, religion, all place limits upon us emotionally, psychologically, even physically as an athlete, what it is that we can and can't do. Divinity is the part of us that allows us to become more than those limits. So some examples of divinity are things like imagination, creativity, innovation, empathy, sympathy, compassion, the ability to love, the ability to forgive, are all expressions of human divinity. So the reason this comes into the conversation is because divinity is only possible through a body, through a biological, in this world anyway, we need a body to express these facets of our experience. Divinity is what frees us from fear. And divinity is where we find our power. So I'm not surprised that if there are powers and forces that want us to conform to a new idea of what the world should look like, that they would veil or deny us access to our divinity. The transhuman movement does just that. When you replace the natural biology with synthetics, you're denying that being access to their divine providence. And that kind of brings it full circle.
Yeah.
So as we barrel down this path toward 2030, we're going to see an intensified effort to accept technology into our bodies. And we won't be told this. One of the net effects is that we are veiling or denying our divinity by doing that. And once we do that, we become very, very different people. So that's it is a deep conversation. It may not even be fair to have it in this brief format, but does that part make sense, Kris?
Yes, it absolutely makes sense. And then inside of, your book, Pure Human, I'm really glad that you put in what you just said, because people still have a choice, right? They can have a free will. And so every day is divinity, to be divine, to be connected. And the destiny for us is to live free and to be conscious. And I think those that are kind of waking up are going to be able to shift if they learn how to tap into that divinity, which is what we're talking about. Because the other things, like, this is what's happening, but then there's the divinity, daily divinity, like you talk about in your book.
Well, sure. I mean, and I'm, again, with acknowledge, for some people, what we just covered sounds like a lot.
Right.
And not to get lost, don't get lost in the weeds there.
Yeah.
I'm bringing together seemingly disparate parts of what we see in everyday life, to show that there is a structure. The world is not coming apart at the seams for no reason. It's not random. It's not spontaneous.
Exactly.
There's a structure. There's a process, and we're in it. It's not like it's going to happen. We're in it. And the only way out of it is to go through it. So I've given some highlights of what that process looks like. The bottom line is we don't have to know any of that. It really comes down to love, simply to love.
Right.
And I think the question that we all have to ask ourselves every day, Kris, is do we love ourselves, or as an individual, do I love myself enough to accept the deep truth of what it means to be human and the responsibility that comes with human divinity? Do I love myself enough to accept those things? And the answer to that kind of a question is, you don't answer it with words. You answer through the way you live your life. It's your actions. Because you can say yes, and then the actions don't support that yes. So every moment of every day, we make the choice to either affirm or deny our divinity through the way we speak to other people. That is part of it.
Yep.
How do we address other people? Do we address them with kindness or with hate? Do we belittle them, or do we empower them and uplift them in the world, in their lives? How do we allow other people to speak to us? How do we nourish the gift of our bodies that makes our divinity possible? Do we feed the body the highest forms of nutrition so that we can be the healthiest that we've ever been? Man, we are going to need to be so healthy in these next 5 years. Always. Right. It's always important.
Yeah.
But the stress of the changes, the magnitude of social engineering that's being proposed to remake our society, our financial system, our economic system, the way we think of jobs and careers and family, all in a single generation. I mean, these are the kinds of changes you would expect to see over multiple generations, and they're trying to compress this, compact it. And there are reasons for that, because of events that are expected in that 2030 timeframe. So that boils down to stress. And the healthier we are, the better that we can resolve. You still have the stress, but you resolve it in a healthy way. Unresolved stress is where the problems come from. So we, in a part of the book, I actually talk about, it's in chapter 7, recognizing the marketing strategies that are deceiving us to accept these things into our world, and into our bodies.
Yeah.
And it was a really interesting chapter for me to write. The title of the chapter is called Breaking the God Spell of Technology. And I'm describing how social media, the algorithms, create what are called information silos.
I've created the Safe Money Blueprint. This is the same strategy that thousands of my clients have used to feel secure about their financial future. And you can get it free at healthymoneyhappylife.com/blueprint.
Where so do you have kids by any chance? Do you have any kids?
I don't. They're all mine, though.
Okay. Well, if you had kids,
yeah.
So I'm just as an example, and I apologize. I probably shouldn't have asked you that.
Okay.
I don't either.
I take responsibility for all of them. So
I have no children either. But but here's what happens. So you might be sitting at your family dinner table, and if you had kids, they'd be at the same table,
right?
36 inches across from you. You have been on your YouTube and your Facebook, and maybe you did some research on a presidential candidate or on a policy that a candidate is proposing. I'm just saying, using this as an example. Okay, so that research, the algorithms are going to go out and they're going to bring you one viewpoint based on the way that you ask that question. But here's the tricky part. Now that algorithm will only bring you information about that viewpoint to the exclusion of all the others. Now, your kids, they may have asked a similar question. They asked it differently. They got a different viewpoint, and the algorithms are now feeding them only information supporting their viewpoint. When that happens, it's called an information silo, because you're effectively in a silo. You're distanced. I'm not going to say you can't find it, but you are distanced from other information. And the way the algorithm does it, now I know everybody watching this probably had this experience. You ask a question and you'll have to go down maybe 10 or 15 pages of answers to get to the answer that offers a different viewpoint, because the algorithm is going to stack it in your favor. This is how we break social bonds that hold families and communities and societies and even the nation together. And that's just one example. So in chapter 7, I identify that and other examples of that are being used to break the social bonds. And what psychologists have found, I remember back in 1970s, cult, C-U-L-T, cults were a really big deal.
Right.
Hippies were in cults. The Charles Manson cult, was all over the news. It wasn't usually in a good light. The word cult had a very negative connotation, and for good reason. And people that wanted to pull their loved ones out of those ideologies had to lead them through what was called a deprogramming. They literally had to go through a deprogramming. And what psychologists are finding is that exact principle applies to what's happening to us today. That people are so entrenched into ideologies based upon their information silos that they have to go through deprogramming, and we can deprogram ourselves. In the book, I give 3 different kinds of programming that are recognized through social media, and the remedy, and it's more, you can't just turn off the social media, because here's why. If you simply turn off the social media, you're already indoctrinated into the last belief that was supported the last time you were on the social media, that you cannot see it anymore, and you're already indoctrinated into that way of thinking. So there is a process to rewire the brain, the neurons in the brain, to think differently. It is a deprogramming. And this is by design, in an effort to break the social bonds, to make us more vulnerable, so that we will accept the ideas that will lead to these 2030 agendas. And I have to say, I know it's happening, and I still see it. And sadly, it has been very effective in polarizing families, husbands and wives. I know couples are getting divorced because they've always known they had different ideas, but their lives were so busy with career and kids, they didn't really get down to the nitty gritty until these last couple of years. And the social media silos ignited those deep differences. And I personally believe they can be worked out. But if you believe it can't be, then you're going to leave that relationship. And maybe it's better if it's less stress and less hurt. Maybe it's better to leave those relationships. But uh, I've seen that happen. I'm seeing certainly the polarization of communities,
Yeah.
Of societies, certainly the polarization of our nation. And the damage, you don't walk that back in a week or two. The kind of damage that's been done because of the deep-seated values that have been attacked, very primal values. And this is not random, it's by design. Very effectively, our nation, the social bonds that have always held us together, I'm not going to say they're gone, I'm going to say they're damaged. And we're seeing the consequence of that. And we're not the only nation. This year is so interesting. This is the year 2024, December, first time in human history. 40 different countries, 40 countries had elections of their highest leaders in the same year. That's never happened.
Right.
And most of those countries rejected the path that the current leaders have taken them on because the people know it's wrong. People, they may not know exactly what we're talking about, but they know when something is evil. They know when something is broken. They know when it's not good for them, and they really know when it's not good for their kids. And
Yeah.
so you're seeing nations reject those old ideas, and then you're seeing the power structures respond to that rejection to try to maintain the power, so they can be in the best position for this 2030 date. So the 2030 date, we could do a whole conversation about this.
Yeah.
The sources all describe something called the event, and that is the word they use. We don't know. As a scientist, I don't know specifically. I don't have a crystal ball. I don't have an inside track. I don't know what the event is. I have my personal suspicions.
Mhm.
But there is something incoming, and you're seeing within 5 years, and you're seeing all of these power structures trying to be in the best position possible to benefit them when that happens. And the best way to do that is to control the population. And the way to do that is to break the social bonds and veil their divinity, veil their agency, veil their ability to live without fear and to love without fear and to freely communicate their imagination and their creativity and their innovations. So those are forms of evil. And in longer conversations, we would talk more about the role of evil. And I do in the book because it's very real and it plays out in many different ways. But we now have a benchmark for evil that we can apply in our lives. Anything that denies us our divinity, anything that denies us or veils or attempts to veil human divinity is an expression of evil. Doesn't mean that the people proposing are evil people, because most of them are not even aware of what it is that we're talking about. They're following the sheep. Politicians, most of them don't even. I'm not saying they're all bad, evil people. They have propensities for weaknesses and vices. So those propensities might be greed, might be sex, might be money,
Yep.
might be power, might be control. So these power structures are the vehicle for them to live those propensities that are actually expressions of evil. They may not know that because they are damaged. They're learning to heal their own broken aspects of their souls for whatever reason that is happening. But the evil itself, we can, and I'm going to use this word very consciously, we can discern when something is evil without judging it. When you judge it, you create a charge on it, you fall into the ancient trap that keeps us stuck in that polarity. And that we don't want to judge it. We want to discern, to recognize it's there and to make healthy choices. And so now we have a benchmark. How do you know when something is evil? when it denies us our divinity and all the things that we just described around divinity. Now, there's a deeper conversation about good and evil and about the soul, about the battle that has been ongoing for 200,000 years between the forces of good and evil described in the ancient texts and our role in it. It's beyond the scope of what we can do here. But I'm saying this because there is a big picture and there is a big context. And we'll get through this. We'll get through it all. And maybe you and I, Kris, 5 years from now, 2030-ish, come back and have a little celebration.
Right.
But the question is, what do we become in the presence of what the world brings to our doorstep? And the purpose of this book is hopefully to elicit from the reader. I hope when they close the book, they have a deeper appreciation for their own humanness, what it means to be human. And recently, I've taken that even a step further. I'm hoping that the reader has a sense of pride in their humanness. I'm proud to be a human. And the more I understand about who and what we are and what our potential is, and our divinity and our divine potential, and what we were given when we appeared 200,000 years ago, the more proud I am to be a human. And the deeper my commitment, I think, to preserve and protect the gift of our humanness rather than give it away to technology, which is the easy path. That's what we're all being asked to do. So other than that, it's a pretty light reading.
Right. But it's mandatory. It really should be mandatory for everybody. It is the keys to humanity, like you say in the book. And this is the shift. This is the awakening for people to realize they're divine. Why not? Right? This is our time. So
yeah. Well, is this conversation? I'm sure it is aligned with other guests that you have in other conversations. Maybe not the same language.
Yes.
But everything that any guest could ever speak about is an expression of what we're saying here. It's an expression of our latent or dormant abilities of divinity, and the role that those abilities play in our lives, whether it's mediumship or whether it's breath work or soul practice or financial management. That is a form of sovereignty that frees us from the stress of feeling vulnerable in the world. So I think it's impossible to talk about anything that doesn't tie back to this fundamental battle between good and evil and to our human divinity. Yeah.
It really is that. And I'll look forward that we can do a deep dive on the good and evil and also some conversation about the healthy money. But I don't want to go off onto another conversation but it really is everything clearly what you just said about this is the awakening and to take the time to really read and look around because you are divine, we are divine, and together the community of the like-minded people will rise. That's what I see. Even as one thing crumbles, we will rise, and that's
in nature, by definition, the end of anything is the beginning of what comes next.
That's right.
So, and I'll be really clear. When we talk about divinity, this has nothing to do with religion.
No.
Religions have attempted to hijack and wrap the rules and the dogma around the divinity because it's where we find our power. I can see why that would happen. But as the power structures, as they buckle and collapse and all of the hidden things come to light, which we're all seeing,
right,
and we're about to see more of in these next few weeks in the disclosure movement through the congressional hearings and the whistleblowers.
Yeah.
As that happens, I think we see more and more the role that we have allowed those power structures to play in our lives. And I think a healthy thing to do is, we could be angry and, lash out, and I could see where people would want to. But I think the healthy thing to do is just to say, we've outgrown all of those power structures.
Right.
and we can, and we're here. They got us where we are today. So they worked to some degree, rough ride, but they worked. And so now we can bless them, let them go.
Right.
And let's move forward into the new world that is not based on the fear and the hurt and the suffering that we all have seen in the 20th and now the early 21st century. And I think it's possible to do that only if we step into our own power, if we accept our own divinity. And that's where that question comes from. Do we love ourselves enough to accept the truth of our humanness and our divinity? And if the answer is yes, live our lives to reflect that yes. And I think that's all we can ask from one another, from ourselves.
Absolutely. That's it right there, Gregg.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, as always, we could go on forever, and I know you're on a media run and got places to go, but we'll continue the conversation, and everybody that's listening, tell them where you're going to have the book out in January, right?
Yeah, well, our publishers, the crazy thing, the book, I believe, is in the warehouse right now in December. They didn't want to release it at the election and Christmas and the inauguration and all that.
Okay.
So it's available for pre-sale right now wherever books are sold. Amazon, Barnes and Noble, my website, my publisher's Hay House. You can go to their website, whatever. But the physical hardback books will be released on January 28th. And I'm hoping they send me some of those because I didn't get the one that you've got. So maybe they'll send me the real book.
See what's in your book, right?
Maybe. No, I know. I just, do I have time? Can I give a shout out to our publisher?
You can go as long as you want. I'm here forever.
Well, I just wanted to do, because it's in your backyard. Hay House.
Yeah.
Is the publisher of this book. They are now distributing through Penguin Random House. So there's a close relationship there. But I really want to give a shout out to Hay House because they gave me the freedom in this book to say what I wanted to say. They very, very little editing went into this book. There, of course, some grammar and things like that. But they did not try to change the tone or the language. They did have to run it through a legal process because I'm identifying WEF, United Nations, factually, not from a libelous perspective. I'm not saying it's not true.
Right.
But identifying their role in the proposals that are being made, and Hay House supported that in ways that exceed anything. I've been with them 20 years, and this is a level of support that I've never seen from them in 20 years. I want to give them a shout out. They're growing, they're changing. We're all learning together. They're good people, and they made it possible for me to write and share with a larger community what you're holding in your hand right there. So thank you, Hay House, if you're watching.
That's great, really. And because they let you write what's really true and not hide it like everything else is. So yeah.
Yeah, well, it's not that they didn't in the past, but they really wanted to focus in the past on what they called self-help. So self-help are processes, like meditations and body work and more very specific focus on the individual. And what I did in this book was identify a context for what's happening in our world, and then some pathways to move through that in the best and the healthiest ways possible. So it's maybe a different form, different idea of self-help. But
and it really is a conversation. Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah. Well, we're growing together. We're all learning. Right. When I started working with Hay House back in late 80s, early 90s, late 90s, early 2000s, and it was a different world then.
Yeah.
So yeah, I want to acknowledge them and just say that.
That's good. That's good. Well, this is a conversation that we need to have now. So I'm so glad that, you were allowed to do what you wanted to do, and they supported you. So
they have.
All right.
Well, Kris, thank you for sharing me with your community and with my family. I hope to see you when I'm in your part of the world after the first of the year. And I look forward to the big fun Kris Gregg podcast part 2.
Yeah.
Whenever that happens. Okay.
All right. I'm on. Thank you. All right. God bless.
All right. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Thank you, Gregg, for sharing your profound insights and challenging us to think deeply about what it means to be human. Pure human is indeed a compelling journey that urges us to reflect on our choices that impact our future. To our listeners, we encourage you to reflect on the questions and themes discussed today. Consider how your choices can shape not only your future, but also the future of humanity. Remember, the power to preserve our humanity lies within us, and it starts with the way that we think about ourselves. Let us choose to love ourselves enough to preserve the gift of our own humanity, our own divinity. As we close this episode, let's remember that we are at a critical juncture in human history. Our choices today will determine the world we live in tomorrow. Let's choose to preserve the gift of our humanity, embrace the extraordinary potential. Let's find the courage to be vulnerable, to love deeply, and to live authentically. Thank you again for tuning in to Money 911. Join us next time for more insightful conversations on health, wealth, and peace of mind. Until then, take care, stay inspired, and feel free to ask questions and let us know what you want to talk with Gregg about next time. I've created the Safe Money Blueprint. This is the same strategy that thousands of my clients have used to feel secure about their financial future. And you can get it free at healthymoneyhappylife.com/blueprint. There's so much to learn about healthy money. I hope today's discussion brings you one step closer to securing and protecting your future. So you can get started on the right foot, go to meetwithkrismiller.com and schedule your free financial fitness strategy session. Thank you for listening, and please subscribe to Money 911 so you don't miss our next episode, which includes health, wealth, and peace of mind.